So first of all, thank you everyone for being here. I'm sure we'll have more people join us as we move forward. Welcome Peck and others as they join. I'm Emily Kanter. I'm one of the co-owners of Cambridge Naturals, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Danielle Ryan Broida, who is the national educator of Sigmatic, which is one of my favorite superfood wellness companies. I'm currently drinking their mushroom cacao with reishi, which comes in these really convenient little packets, but plenty of other options to choose from. This is a nice one for either the end of the day to kind of calm down, or even in the middle of the day. It's both sort of calming and a little bit of a perk for your afternoon. So fun little pick-me-up beverage or a fun chill-out beverage at the end of the day. Feel free, if you have any questions as we're talking, to add your questions as comments into the chat, or we might be able to open it up for verbal questions at the end with your microphones. But again, feel free to add questions into the chat. Danielle is a registered herbalist and a holistic nutritionist, and she is also the instructor of mycology, which sounds like an incredibly cool job, at the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism when she is not quarantined in LA. Danielle, thank you so much for co-hosting this with us, and I'd love to start out learning a little bit more specifically about you and your life path and how that led you to your current position with Sigmatic and the other work that you do.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for being here, everyone. This is so fun. We have so many things that we could cover and so many different angles. Adaptogens are this huge umbrella topic. So I just want to plug that. I want this to be about what you all are interested in, what you want to know. So interaction is highly encouraged. Whether you want to unmute yourself, we made it a meeting style, so this can be really personal and fun. If you don't feel like talking, as Emily mentioned, enter in whatever you want to know in the chat, and then we will try to leave like 10 minutes at the end for just an open Q&A. And I'm going to be multitasking for these first few minutes as I keep letting people in. But a little bit about myself and where I come from. It's a very organic journey. I never thought I would devote my life to functional mushrooms and adaptogenic herbs, but sorry, I'm gonna mute people as they join in. But where it really started, I actually did a story earlier about composting. I was really involved in organic agriculture and growing my own food, building industrial composting systems, and I started learning about mycelium, which is this incredible interconnected, you can think of it like the root system of mushrooms. The fruiting body is the mushroom. But it's so much more than that, right? I like to think of it as the nervous system or the cardiovascular system of our planet, connecting 90%, if not more, plants on Earth. All of us right now underneath our feet, wherever we are on the planet, are stepping on at least 300 miles of mycelium. It's incredible. So getting really passionate about soil health, and I'm always looking at the root. You know, my life goal is like, what is it coming from? You know, it's the opposite of Band-Aid approaches. And that's why I feel so passionate at this time to be really sharing, you know, information and resources and tools about holistic ways that we can support our bodies. And so composting was the root of that for me. And long story short, I ended up moving to Southeast Asia, and I lived there for 3 years and studied with all sorts of different traditional medicine practitioners, really investigating, okay, how can I take control of my own life, right? Not be reliant upon a pill or a system or anything outside of myself to feel full and nourished and healthy. And so northern India and all over, I led treks through hill tribes in Thailand, and just fell in love with plant medicine, natural medicine, and felt so empowered by that. And anyways, I moved back to the States to formalize my studies in herbal medicine. And that's when I moved to Boulder, Colorado. And I opened up a private practice. And I think it's the nature of herbal medicine. Most of the people that showed up at my door said, I've tried every practitioner. You're my last resort. what can you do? And what that brought was a lot of chronic illness, a lot of autoimmune conditions, a lot of ailments that in the Western world we don't have a name for, we don't have a cure for. And so, especially at a time right now where there's a lot of unknowns, I just feel so excited about kind of turning the perspective of being fearful and like, oh my gosh, we don't have an answer. What do we do? And switching that to say, okay, how can I empower myself to have a really strong immune system, to support my stress response so that I'm not a host, so that each of us, whether it's this thing or the next thing or the next, so that each of us are not a host for whatever it is that's out there, right? That we are strong enough to be our own daily bodyguard, our own warriors. So anyways, yeah, through private practice and the type of individuals that were attracted to my practice or vice versa, there were very few plant medicines that I was able to use for kind of these extreme bodies. And so I started focusing more and more on functional mushrooms and adaptogens for their ability to be used in such a wide range of conditions, right? As adaptogens, as immunomodulators, which we can get into. And I actually found for Sigmatic, Emily, our company, in the search to find a way to get these allies, really, I think of them as allies, to a wider audience in an easier, more accessible way. And so for the last couple years, I've worn every hat at Four Sigmatic. I've made a bunch of our formulas. I've done questions on customer service team and answered our phones for people like, I have this weird ailment, what can you do? And now, yeah, my title is National Educator. So I basically get to, you know, if you sign up for our newsletters or follow us on different social platforms, my goal is to inspire and excite people about using functional mushrooms and adaptogens every day.
That's awesome. It seems like a sort of perfect culmination of, you know, a lot of your career history leading up to this point. And certainly, I mean, it will continue on, but it does seem like, you know, this was sort of the correct place that you're supposed to be on this journey, given everything that you've done so far. And I love, you know, how you talk about the ways that Western medicine unfortunately doesn't address the root causes. You know, like we tend to look at disease as the tip of the iceberg, what's showing up, but not what's underlying. And maybe if we're able to address the underlying, the root causes, we will have less of that tip of the iceberg type ailment. And certainly our customers are coming in seeking some of those same solutions as well. So that's really exciting. I'd love to learn more specifically, and for everyone here, about Four Sigmatic. You know, who are they? What are the company's origins? And what drives Four Sigmatic? What is the mission and the purpose of the company?
Yeah, I love that. So we are a superfood wellness company, and our goal is to help people achieve what we call elevated wellness with the world's most nutrient-dense foods. And so we're not just a mushroom company, we're not just a coffee company, but if I explain what Four Sigmatic means, it might give some context into what we're all about. So essentially, this is a very heady name, and stick with me here. But if you take all the edible foods in the world and you put them on a graph based on their nutrient density, some foods are horrible for you, some foods are amazing for you, and most foods are okay. They're average. This is a graph of natural distribution, right? This is what happens if you take the height of everyone in the world or the shoe size of everyone in the world, right? There's going to be natural outliers, and then there's going to be the average that falls in the middle. Same thing with edibles, right? The things that we're nourishing ourselves with. So on a graph of natural distribution, the measurements are called standard deviations or sigmas. So if you draw a mean, so we have this graph, there's a bell curve that forms.
Yep.
Bad foods, good foods, the average. If you draw a mean in the center, every measurement away from that mean is called a sigma, right? So if you go negative sigmas, the foods get worse and worse for you. They get lower in their nutrient density. Things like, I think, corn syrup and GMO and processed refined sugar, etc. In the positive sigma direction, the foods are getting more rare, more unique, more nutrient dense. So 1 Sigma foods are whole foods, things that all of our great grandmothers would recognize. An actual egg, right? An actual apple.
Yeah.
2 Sigma foods, we're getting into staple foods, a lot of our grains and legumes. 3 Sigma foods are health foods. So this is where most of our fruits and vegetables fall. And then 4 Sigmas, this is the farthest deviation from that mean, there's about 50 to 100 foods in the world that fall into this category. These are the 50 to 100 most nutrient dense foods on the planet. And so what we're all about is using only this 4 Sigma category foods, AKA superfoods, which doesn't actually have a standard definition, but we're using the most nutrient dense foods. And a lot of those, about 10 of those are functional mushrooms. There are also things like turmeric, ginger, matcha, a lot of the herbs that we might be talking about today, like ashwagandha, schizandra, rhodiola. So a lot of our adaptogens. And, you know, we realize that it's really hard to get people to start new habits. Mm-hmm. And we don't want the world's most nutrient dense foods to be like, yeah, I'll try that once. Where we're going to see long-term holistic benefits is when those become part of our routines. And so we'll never make pills or capsules. What we want to do is make these more of a food. We want to look at what are people already doing, what routines exist, and how can we incorporate these nutrient dense 4 Sigma foods into existing routines, because that's where sustainability can come. So that's why we combine things like chaga mushroom, the king of mushrooms, into your morning cup of coffee, or reishi mushrooms into an evening treat, right? Most of us want something sweet at the end of the day. Right. Or, you know, we do plant-based protein and edible skincare, and what routines exist and how can we create a better for you option to help all of us meet the demands of modern life.
Yeah, that's really terrific. And, you know, certainly I have found that it's, you know, often easier for me to remember like, oh, I'll have a nice warm beverage than like, oh gosh, I've got to take that supplement again that I, you know, take every day. And it's also more of a treat, and it reminds you too that it is a food and not just, I think we tend to think of supplements as like just things that are created in a lab. And, you know, certainly a lot of our herbal supplements are made from raw plant material that was harvested by someone, maybe even someone we know. And, you know, there's a whole supply chain to it. But when you look at the capsule, it just tends to seem like this obscure thing that appeared out of nowhere, without, you know, a lot of thought behind what the product is. So, you know, I love that your products actually feel a lot like real food, and it's a connection to the growing cycle and to harvesting and all of those things.
And in almost all traditions of natural medicine, whether it's Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine, in folklore, so much of the power of the medicine, that plant medicine or fungi medicine, begins in the mouth, right? Mm-hmm. It begins when we taste the flavor. So when we taste sour or we taste bitter, that's the start of the energetics working in our systems. And so I love to say we are reviving ancient traditions, right? Yeah. What do you mean? You're this trendy company starting this new mushroom coffee? It's like, yeah, we're packaging it in a way that makes sense for the modern world, but the way that we're doing it we're really trying to keep traditional medicine alive, just in a way that works for us in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, we have to, as a society, we maybe have to adapt to tastes that we have sort of become unaccustomed to now. You know, we're used to sweet and salty and fatty, but we're not used to bitter and sour in the same way. And I also love that, you know, like this is totally delicious and I'm really enjoying drinking it, but some of the products are kind of bitter and earthy, and that's actually okay. Like, it's good to taste your herbs and have the real experience of them rather than have it sugar coated for you. So yeah, Total sense. So, today we're especially here to talk about adaptogens. Lots of our customers are familiar with adaptogens, but many of them aren't. And, obviously most of us these days are feeling quite stressed, depleted, anxious, perhaps, unable to focus during the day and feeling kind of tired, but then unable to sleep at night. So what exactly are adaptogens, and how can they help the body and mind, especially during this stressful time, but even beyond?
Yeah, and I would love to hear from you guys maybe while I'm explaining adaptogens, who takes adaptogens already every day, or maybe somewhat consistently, and what you're taking, and then I can kind of tailor how deep or shallow we go based on where you're all at. But essentially, adaptogens, so the way that we categorize natural medicine is we take plants and we look at what they do, what action they have in the body, and then we basically put them in umbrella categories based on that. So for example, we have herbs that are supporting, deep sleep, right? So we have like our skullcap or passion flower, maybe chamomile or hops in a gentler version, right? Nervines, right? Or we have digestive herbs that are warming and carminative, supporting, like cinnamons and ginger, nutmeg, clove, cardamom, etc. Adaptogens are an umbrella category similar to that. So we have both fungi, right, mushrooms and plants that fall into this category adaptogen. And there's 3 criteria for something to be an adaptogen. So the first is that it must be non-toxic, so naturally occurring. It's coming from nature. It's coming from a plant or a fungi. The second is that it's non-habit forming. So this means it's not only safe to take every day, most of the tradition is taken every single day as a tonic for long-term use. It builds upon itself. You don't build a habit or a tolerance to it as you would something like coffee or green tea, right? Where you need more and more to experience the same effect. So it's non-habit forming. And then the third, which is kind of what stops people up sometimes, is that it's non-specific. Okay, so it's non-specific. And what this means is most of our natural medicine is stimulating or depressing. It's having this direct kind of, I'm coming from here to here in the body, right? I'm starting here, I'm going to push you in one direction or another. But adaptogens are really unique. They're almost like cruise control. And so depending on each body, they're going to have a slightly different action to help us adapt to what our body's needs are. And so we often look at adaptogens in terms of their ability to support our stress response. And how you can think of it is, so if you think of a city, I love metaphors. I think it's really helpful to understand. But if you think of a city, there's a reservoir in a lot of cities, right? So in case drought hits, you have this reserve to pull from, so you're not just depleted. And I like to think of all of our bodies as having a vital reserve. Mm-hmm. And adaptogens are like filling that vital reserve, because stress is inevitable. Internal stressors, whether it's emotionally, different times of the month, whatever it might be, or external stressors, someone cutting you off, someone yelling at you, the news, whatever it might be, environmental stress, it's inevitable. And what we want is to have tools to have this reserve so that when that stress comes up, that our bodies have the tools to both more quickly react as well as recover from that stressor to bring us back into this state of equilibrium. And this is exactly what adaptogens are doing. When we don't have adaptogens and we're pulling and we're stressed, eventually we're exhausted, right? There's nothing left in our reserve. Adrenal fatigue, right? We crash. And so adaptogens are such an important way to basically holistic way to build and make sure that our bodies have the tools needed for whenever the disaster comes, like we're ready and we can get back to normal and our state of vitality at a quick kind of turnaround.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful, and one of the most succinct ways that I've heard adaptogens described. So I'm glad we have this recorded, because I'll go back and listen to it again. Because I often talk to customers about adaptogens, but I even struggle with sort of like the specific way to describe them in comparison to some other herbs you might take for similar needs. Like if someone comes in and they're exhausted during the day and they need to focus, certainly there are adaptogens that we tend to recommend, or if they feel like they need a lot of extra sleep at night and they're not getting it, there are other herbs and adaptogens that we will recommend. But sometimes it's not clear whether or not somebody's not sleeping because they're actually like too wired, or too like their cortisol levels are off. There's all kinds of factors that can lead into someone struggling with sleep or struggling with stress. And it's certainly, I think, hard these days to communicate that maybe there's there's not a specific one answer for it. We're used to like, give me a red pill and I'll, or a blue, I don't know, I didn't really watch The Matrix, but give me a pill and make it go away. And adaptogens are kind of like the polar opposite of that approach.
There's two things there. I want to mention one, that adaptogens are on a spectrum, just as nervines, right? We have like gentle things, maybe like a mint might relax you a little bit versus like a valerian is going to put you out, depending on the body. Similarly with our adaptogens, we have stimulating adaptogens, things like ginseng, eleuthero root, and then more calming adaptogens like tulsi, holy basil, or ashwagandha. And so, not all adaptogens are created equal. I guess we'll make that plug. But when you were talking about someone saying, I'm not sleeping, or maybe I have a headache, can I start with adaptogens? It makes so much sense when we think evolutionarily about our stress response. And I'm sure we've all heard this a ton, but just to remind us, stress is actually a very helpful tool that our bodies evolved to experience to keep us alive, right? When there's an acute threat, our body pumps the system with stress hormones. We have adrenaline and cortisol, and we're able to fight that acute threat or run to save our life. Where it becomes problematic is when it's chronic or long-term. And when we think about us being in a stress response, which now it's not just when there's that acute threat, it's like a low-level chronic stress all the time.
Right.
But when we're, evolutionary in that stress response, I almost think of like our phones, this is a horrible example. Basically, I was going to say airplane mode. All like other symptoms of the body, other things that our bodies evolved to do, give us hunger signals, give us hormones that tell us we're tired. All of these things, they kind of go on airplane mode, or they take the back seat because our body thinks that we are in an acute threat and we need to be kept alive. We're literally in survival mode. And so it's incredible, things that you didn't even think had anything to do with stress that begin to resolve themselves once adaptogens are brought on board for a couple weeks, right? And that stress response is able to be tampered. It's like, oh, I actually, I can fall asleep naturally. My body thought that I was needing to, fight a giant animal.
Right, or a giant virus.
Right, exactly.
Danielle, I'd love to know, what are you taking specifically these days? What are your favorite mushrooms and botanicals that you're incorporating into your daily diet, in general, but also especially given the crisis that we're in right now?
Yes. So you're not going to love this answer, I'll tell you, but I have to make the plug that it's so easy when you hear like, oh, that person's taking this, I'm going to take it too. And my philosophy, I'm a vitalist herbalist, which means I believe that every body is unique. We each have our own constitution, and there's different things that are going to work for me versus you. And it's really not about your age or your gender or your weight, or it's so many other factors. What else are we eating? How's our liver functioning? What are our detoxification pathways like? How well am I sleeping? My stress response? And so the adaptogens.
Just tell me what's gonna work for me, okay? Just give me the answer.
I know, but I just have to say what works for me might not work for you. And so the important thing, I'll absolutely give some suggestions, but I want each of you to listen to your own body. It's your best judge. And this is all about connection, so that you have the tools to understand, okay, what I can hear my body, what is it telling me? Oh, I know I'm stressed right now, and then have tools to support yourselves during those times. Um, my favorite functional mushroom is reishi, which is what Emily is drinking right now. Reishi is our queen of mushrooms. Literally, she's known as the queen of mushrooms. And in traditional Chinese medicine, all herbs and fungi are ranked. There's a hierarchy. And reishi is known as is the number one herb or tonic in all of TCM. So she's responsible for, there's over 500 different actions that reishi can have in your body based on what your body is experiencing. And so it's really, that's something so incredible. Even though all of our bodies are different, if Emily and I both take the same reishi extract, right, and that mushroom cacao you're drinking, 500 milligrams of reishi mushroom extract in that, depending on what my body needs and what Emily's body needs, there's going to be a different effect, which I think is so beautiful. So reishi is such a powerful ally to really support kind of that baseline stress that we're dealing with. And chaga right now, we'll do 2 mushrooms. Chaga is incredible. You want to make sure you know where your chaga is coming from. At Sigmatic, we wild harvest ours from the largest birch forest in the world. It's called the taiga forest in Siberia. But one of our packets of chaga elixir, it's like a straight up chaga tea powder. And the amount, we have 1,500 milligrams of, this is really heady, but dual extracted, wild crafted chaga mushroom in there. And the amount of antioxidants in that is equivalent to about 30 pounds of carrots. So when we think about, not only is it an adaptogen, is it supporting our immune system, but it's flooding our body with antioxidant properties, which I like to think about as kind of building our own defenses. Like if our systems are full of antioxidant properties, if our immune system is really strong, even if we walk out into the world and there's people coughing all over us, like your body isn't going to be a host, ideally, for whatever is out there, right? You're your own bodyguard. So we call chaga. Yeah, I would say, yeah, reishi and chaga for sure my top 2. And then depending on what you're experiencing, we can recommend others, right? Tulsi and ashwagandha are probably my top 2 in the plant kingdom, right? Tulsi, holy basil, incredible Ayurvedic leaf, right? Known as this wisdom herb in traditional Indian medicine. I used to live in India, and there's no house is thought to be complete if there isn't a Tulsi plant on the altar. So it's this really, really sacred. In Sanskrit, Tulsi actually translates to the incomparable one. So it's thought to be really balancing, right? Restorative balancing for all different parts of our being, the physical, the energetic, the spiritual. So really, really wonderful plant. We could talk about each species for an hour.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing what you're taking, even though, yes, of course, the message is that, you know, each of us have to try each of these plants for ourselves, of course, you know, making sure that there aren't any contraindications with anything else that we're taking, and, you know, talking to a doctor or pharmacist. But I think that that's, again, you know, so contra to the advice that we're typically given in Western medicine. Usually it's like a one size fits all medicinal approach. And, you know, I love that with Sigmatic and so many other alternative medicine companies, it's really about like listening to your body and letting your body lead the healing as you're trying out these, you know, plant medicines and fungi medicines. Courtney on our team had a question about adaptogens. Are there adaptogens that folks feel right away? So, you know, her understanding and most people's understanding is that adaptogens are best to take consistently over time. You know, you don't feel them, like you can't, you know, drink this and immediately necessarily feel something, but maybe you do. Is it worth it to take a small dose at once, and can you feel them right away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say really understanding the sourcing is really important. So when we're talking about functional mushrooms, there's a huge range of dose and whether you're going to feel it or not based on what part of the plant or fungi you're using, how it's been extracted, if it's been tinctured or decocted, if it's been spray dried, if it's just raw and powdered. So you really want to know what you're getting. The three things that I'm really passionate about are basically carrying on the tradition. So using the mushrooms in the way they've been used for that up to 5,000 years in many different traditions. So that means the fruiting body, that the mushrooms are grown on what they evolved to grow upon. So log grown, wild harvested, and then making sure they're extracted. Our bodies actually can't absorb the compounds in them if they're raw. So if you're checking off those three things, anywhere from 500 to 1,500 milligrams is a really good, safe dose for anyone to start with. And I'd recommend that for about 3 to 5 days, and then building up based on how you're feeling. And some people do say, yeah, I feel this after one time taking it. Other people, we kind of forget. It's really interesting when something's wrong and it begins to improve. I can't tell you how many clients are like, oh, I actually forgot that I was experiencing that negative symptom for months or years. And so you can do a before symptoms checklist is a really helpful way to compare.
I love that.
And then after, a couple weeks, I would recommend at least 2 weeks, daily consistent use, doing it again. But yeah, it's amazing. And when we're taking something like adaptogens that are supporting occasional stress and immune response, oftentimes what you feel is, oh, I usually get sick every winter or every change of season, and that didn't happen. Or it can be a much more subtle, but it really depends on what species you're talking about, right? So if you're taking a ton of, Siberian ginseng, like you're probably going to feel that a lot more than if you take like some nice holy basil tea before you go to bed.
Totally.
Yeah, but great question.
Yeah, one thing that just occurred to me about Four Sigmatic, and then we should definitely get to the customer questions or participant questions, but the fact that all of your products, since they're not in capsules, it requires you to put it into hot water or a smoothie or a cold beverage, and drink it, and it's a ritual. So you can't just like pop them in and then forget about it. You actually have to like take a moment of pause to enjoy it. And I don't know if that was intentional or not. I'm assuming it was, but it's a big part of the experience of taking the products is making time to sit with yourself and think about how you're feeling. And you don't often get that in this crazy world. So yeah, that's a really nice aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it's so much more than drinking mushrooms or drinking adaptogens, which is amazing, but it's just, as you said, it's all about connection. And I find, fungi to me are really the grand teachers of connection. We talked about mycelium at the beginning, connecting all plants on earth, being within plants. They're the grand decomposers of the world, right? Without fungi, we'd be under several feet of debris across the whole planet. So they connect life and death. I mean, they are connectors, and that's what I think the medicine is. And so how do we begin to connect to ourselves, to the earth, to that which is nourishing our body? It's by taking that time, that pause, that mindful moment to, actually be with that which is supporting us.
Yeah, absolutely. So Michael asks, some practitioners say to take mushrooms earlier in the day as some can be stimulating. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it definitely, depending on the mushroom you're using, I think if you're going to use the same one for more than a couple weeks, midday or in the morning or midday, because they do build vitality, right? So even things like reishi can help, if we're really stressed, can actually help bring us into a state of deeper sleep. But if you do that every day, ideally your body is going to start regulating again. And so you will start building that vitality. So I personally, before Four Sigmatic, I never took reishi at night. I would take reishi every morning, but people get confused. They're like, wait, what do you mean? I need to know when to take it and why in this time of day. But yeah, generally I would say, if more than a couple weeks, taking functional mushrooms anywhere from like first thing when you wake up to midday, mid-afternoon. And then of course, just keep listening to your body, right? There's always outliers to that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Peck asked, could you talk about Eleuthera? I was given a box of the chaga mushroom elixir, but I'm a little worried about ingredients that might cause heart palpitations. And we always have to say we're not doctors or pharmacists. We can't diagnose and prescribe. But yeah, I would love to hear your perspective, Danielle.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, and I saw the next two, I peeked ahead, sorry, but I saw the next two questions that were about ashwagandha and eleuthero rhodiola as well. So I just want to share, I could have shared this before, but I'm going to share my screen so I can show you all what we're talking about when we talk about these adaptogens. Can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we'll start with, this is eleuthero. Eleutherococcus centinocus. So we actually use the root, but it's also known as Siberian ginseng. And it can be a little bit stimulating. It's not as stimulating as a typical ginseng, like an Asian ginseng, but it can be, depending on, how sensitive your body is. But it definitely helps with energy and vitality, of course, the immune system and stress response. I put a fun fact in these because understanding the origin of plant uses can give us so much information about what it's doing to our bodies today. So eleuthero's original use was, or in modern day, was by astronauts to help protect them against the stress of zero gravity, right? Because how stressful that is on the body. So that's like kind of how I think of it versus rhodiola. Rhodiola is so cute. It's actually a succulent. This is a really blown up picture. But we also use the root. So it's this gorgeous little succulent that is so resilient. So it grows on in the toughest climates on earth, from Mongolia, I put here Siberia, Scandinavia, like really, really harsh environments. And Vikings would use rhodiola to help give like strengthen their immune system during really long, cold winters. And so when I think about this cute little succulent able to survive these wild, harsh conditions around it, that's how I want you to think of it supporting your body, right? Is giving you endurance, giving you an ability to tolerate these crazy stressors that might be going on around you. Ashwagandha, beautiful ashwagandha. Again, we use the root, but this is the aerial parts of the plant. Ashwagandha is also known as Indian ginseng. This is why Latin names are so important. I'm such a geek about Latin names, but one plant can be called 10 different common names depending on where in the world you're talking about it. But when we show the Latin name, we know we're talking about the same species, right? So you just say ginseng, it's like, are you talking about ashwagandha? Are you talking about eleuthero? But ashwagandha, so I'm going to start with this fun fact, is in Sanskrit, they say smells like horse. And some people think they're like equine root. And people sometimes think the root actually has that odor to it. But I like to think of ashwagandha as making you as strong as a horse. So when you think about a horse is graceful, but strong, right? Mm-hmm. So there's no, ashwagandha isn't going to stimulate you, but it's right. going to give you that kind of graceful ease to, I'm thinking of like the stallion, out into the world.
I like to think about ashwagandha in terms of endurance, like a really long, stressful day. I feel like when I take ashwagandha consistently, I can actually just like breathe and move through the day without being instantly depleted by it. Absolutely. The endurance of a stallion.
Absolutely. Okay. And we can't leave out holy basil. You guys can just look at gorgeous oxymum sanctum, our Tulsi, right? Our mind, body, spirit, full body vitality adaptogen. Okay.
Cool. And then Michael asked, could you speak to the energizing aspects of cordyceps, especially for exercising?
Yeah, absolutely. Cordyceps is an amazing little fungi. Michael, do you take cordyceps already?
He takes everything.
Yeah. So cordyceps, when we're talking about our fun facts, originally cordyceps is found above 13,000 feet. So up in primarily the Himalayas, right? Tibet, China, Nepal, northern India. And it was used by Sherpas or mountain climbers to give them endurance and an ability to climb to higher altitudes and breathe and have an ability to kind of thrive in these harsher conditions. What we know now is cordyceps is there's several different compounds, but it's a vasodilator, and it can increase our body's ability to uptake oxygen. And so I used to use cordyceps a lot in my private practice for clients with asthma. I also in Colorado live at about 6,000 feet. So when people come and visit me, I'm like, well, I can't breathe it. I'm up here. I give them cordyceps, right? So it's not that there's a stimulant in cordyceps. It's not like propping us up as, say, something like caffeine would be doing, but it is increasing oxygen. If anyone does like Wim Hof or different breath work, we know that when we're over oxygenating our system, we feel more energized. That said, cordyceps is one of those few functional mushrooms that I think you can feel maybe after 1 or 2 uses. And when we're talking about, it always comes back to holistic long-term supporting of the body. And so I recommend when working with athletes to take cordyceps actually in recovery. So you can take it before pre-workout to feel the effects, but it can be, you can start to rely on it a little bit. I started using it before runs or hot yoga. I'm like, I need that cordyceps. And we never want that, right? We never want to need something. It's how can we just build our system so we're strong enough on our own. And so if you are doing some sort of endurance sports or long runs or, swimming, whatever it might be, try cordyceps a couple times, feel the power. And then longer term, I would take it to rebuild and repair in recovery mode.
Wonderful. Use cordyceps hiking, in the Wallowa Mountains. Worked really well up high. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I want to honor the time and let everyone get to hopefully a nice and healthy and relaxing dinner before relaxing for the evening. Thank you so much, Danielle, for being here with us this evening. And thank you, Courtney, for organizing this. Hopefully next time, we were supposed to have this as like, I think, a customer lecture in person, but that was well before this crisis emerged. And so, of course, we had to switch gears, but hopefully we'll be able to have you back in person in our stores sometime in the future. So thanks again, and we'll share this via our Instagram and post it on our website as well. So if anyone wants to go back and learn more about these specific adaptogens, and of course, check out for Sigmatic, lots of really wonderful products to try. So thank you, Danielle.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Have a wonderful evening.